for some reason, so a sale doesn't take place, but you still feel happy afterwards because you had a good conversation with a nice person. Isn't that true? So you feel good and you're out, you're ready to go to the next call, even though you didn't make it wasn't successful, it wasn't the right thing for Henry. That's not the problem. The problem is dealing with difficult people. People who don't appreciate you and people who are not nice to you. So from now on, for the rest of your career, don't deal with difficult people. Because there's several reasons. Number one, they're not going to buy anyway. So you're wasting your time. Number two, if they do buy, they won't pay. Number three, if they do buy and they do pay, they complain all the time. They're always complaining, always calling you up and having you come over so they can complain to you. You know, they're what are called customers from hell. And you all know what I'm talking about. And there are many companies today that have done this analysis that we're talking about, and they've decided to fire their customers. They've decided that there are some customers that are not worth it, and they call them up and they say, you know, we would not like to have your business anymore. We would like you to go and buy from our competitor and ruin their life. Because the most important thing you have is the fact that you're up. You're optimistic, you're positive, you're happy, you're high energy, you're a nice person, you are well informed about your product, you have something valuable to sell at a good price, and your job is to get to the people who will appreciate it. Now, in a good market, everybody's buying. In a bad market, not so many people are buying, so you're going to have to call on more people in order to make the same number of sales. So you don't weep and cry, you say, well, this is just the way it is. If it's hot outside, you don't say, wah, it's so hot. Wah, wah. It's like weather. The economy is like the weather. You can't do anything about it. You just adjust to it, right? And you don't complain about it. You say, business is bad. No. You say, well, business is slower today than it was before. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And here's a wonderful thing. If you can succeed in today's economy, when the economy does turn around, and it always does, you will be so far ahead. You will be smarter, you will be quicker, you'll be more determined, you'll be more focused, you'll be more confident. So look upon it as a challenge to make you strong. Just like a runner will often run with weights or carry weights. Imagine that this is a weight that you're carrying, and when the economy turns around, you take off the weight and you will be wonderful at your field. So look upon it as a challenge. And people say, business is bad. Isn't that good? Say, that's good. That's good. Isn't that great? Because all the weaklings quit. Leaves more money for the professionals. Someone says, boy, business is hard, sales are hard. You say, yeah, why don't you quit? Yeah, get out of here. Okay. So prospecting means to ask, is this a good prospect? And when you call people, when you prospect for people, say, hello, this is Bryan Tracy. I'm with ABC Company, and I think we can help you. And whenever you prospect, always talk about the result or the benefit of your product or service. You see, a good prospect is interested in the result or benefit of what you sell. A poor prospect always says, how much is it? How much is it? How much is it? Well, you don't even know what it is yet, but how much is it? Well, that's too much. Well, it's too much for what? Well, whatever it is, it's too much. You know what I'm talking about, Henry? Drives you crazy. You say, come here a little bit closer. Whack. Ow, 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 ow. You know, you want to hit. But a good prospect, when you say, I think we can save you a good deal of money in your word processing costs, or I think that we can really speed up your time of delivery, or we can really improve what you're doing and give you better service at the same price. A good prospect wants to know how. Well, how does it work, or what is it? A poor prospect says, how much is it? I can't afford it. Cost too much. Business is bad. Life's a bitch, and then you die. You know. So it's really important. So prospecting is important. Now, I want to show you what I call the golden triangle of selling. Now, the golden triangle of selling is my own invention. And it's, I think, basically the key to modern selling. It has three parts. And let's put the customer or the prospect in the center. And it has three parts. And the first part, part one, is what I call relationship selling. Now, relationship selling is the key to success now and for the future. Is the very best salespeople are very good. We call them relationship experts. They're very, very good at forming high-quality relationships with people that they meet. We say that there's two parts. This first part of selling is prospecting. The second part is developing rapport or establishing a friendly relationship with the customer. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. My friend Lou Holtz says whenever you meet a new person in business or even personally, they only want to know the answer to one question: do you care about me? Do you care about me? They don't care about your product. Forget your product. Do you care about me? How can you show a person that you care about them? How can you show a person that you care about them more than just wanting to make a sale? Right from the time you meet them. Well, okay, I'll give you several ideas. Obviously my coming here was an emergency. So they flew me in on a jet. When you meet a person for the first time, recognize that everybody's busy. So what I always do is I say, thank you very much for your time. I know how busy you are. As soon as you do that, you immediately separate yourself from the average person who just starts talking. I thank you very much for your time. I know how busy you are. People immediately stop because people don't recognize how busy they are. Nobody appreciates anybody else's time. Now, whenever you phone a person and you get through to the person, the very first thing you say is, hello, this is Bryan Tracy, or this is Henry. Is this a good time to talk? I need about 2 minutes of your time to ask you a couple of quick questions. Is this a good time for you? As soon as you say that, the person stops, because it's obvious you're a professional. You must be in the top 10% or moving there very quickly, because this is how the top 10% talk. This is based on thousands of studies. The top 10% are very respectful of people's time. They don't say, hi, this is Bryan Tracy, I want to call. No. What they do is say, hi, this is Bryan Tracy, is this a good time for you? Now, I do this with my best friends. When I call them and I get through to them in business, they take the call because it's me, and I say, hi, Mike, is this a good time for you? I need about 2 minutes. And sometimes they say, you know, Bryan, somebody just came into my office. I got 2 other people here. The building's on fire. Most cases, something's going on. Remember, every single call that you make on a customer is an interruption. Every single call you make is an interruption. You are interrupting them from something that at that moment is more important than you are. So what you do is just slow down a bit and you say, is this a good time? And if you meet them face to face, you say, thank you very much for your time. I know how busy you are. They'll immediately relax and realize you're a professional. And they'll treat you very differently because you're treating them very differently. What you're saying is, I care about you. I care about you as a person, and I know how busy you are. So relationship selling is based on establishing a high-quality relationship. And I'll give you the other 2 parts of the triangle, and I want to come back to relationship selling because it really is the key to your future. The second part of the triangle, set number 2, is what we call consultative selling. And consultative selling is where you position yourself as a problem solver. You position yourself as a consultant. I'll explain this in a second. And the third part of selling is what we call educational selling, where you don't sell as much as you educate or teach. You teach the person, you learn the person's situation with questions, and then you teach them how your product or service can help them in a cost-effective way. You see, teaching is really the key to the future of selling. You're not trying to sell. You're not trying to talk people out of money. You're trying to teach them how they can improve their life or their work with what you do. The number one reason that people buy your product or service is they understand how much better off they can be. The number one reason why they don't is because they don't understand how much better off they can be, because you didn't teach them. You may have assumed that they know, but you didn't teach them. Well, let me show you something that I think is one of the great breakthroughs in the psychology of selling, and it has to do with what is called positioning. Now, I know you're all familiar with positioning. Positioning is a trend in marketing started by Al Ries and Jack Trout, who wrote a book some 20 years ago called Positioning: The Battle for the Mind of the Customer. And positioning says that here's a customer, typical customer. Okay? And in the back of the customer's mind, there's a series of file boxes, very much like the boxes behind the check-in desk of one of the old hotels, okay, for mail, messages, and keys. Now, when the customer sees you, okay, here's you, or hears you, or thinks about you, the customer then opens a box for you. This is your box in the customer's mind. And by the way, you're exactly the same. The first impression is the most lasting impression. That's why we say you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. But whatever is in that customer's box determines how the customer reacts to you, thinks about you, feels about you, responds to you, takes your calls, buys from you, doesn't buy from you, and so on. So, in this box is you. The question is, what's in the customer's box with regard to you? Now, in positioning, what we do is we say that your job is to shape this positioning. We say that perceptions, the customer's perception of you, equals the customer's reality of you. I'll give you an example. I was in Shanghai earlier this week, and this fellow, nice guy, not very well dressed, square head, looked like his head had been put inside a box and then it grew. Square head, nice guy, not particularly handsome, not very well dressed, average guy. And he came in, and Richard and Patrick said, "You've got to meet this guy." And I said, "Great, I mean, wonderful." They said, "This guy was just written up in Forbes as one of the richest men in China. He developed a software program that had been bought by a major company, and they paid him $46 million cash. He's one of the richest young entrepreneurs in China, and he's come to this seminar." And they brought him in, and I said, "Wow, how are you? Would you like a business card? Would you like 2 business cards? Would you like, would you like several for your friends?" My perception of him, although he is very ordinary looking, my perception of him is, woo, because he's so successful in such a difficult market and written up in Forbes magazine, highly respected, probably richer than almost the whole rest of the audience put together. Can you see what I mean? My perception of him. Now, what if somebody said, "Just joking, he's the taxi driver"? Because he looked like it. I mean, he could have been a taxi driver. But because they had created a positioning of him in my mind. My picture in my mind of this guy, when they said, you're going to meet this guy when he comes in, he's one of the richest men in China, I'm thinking, wow. And he's very ordinary looking, but his perception was, wow. Anything he said, I was going to listen to. The point is this, is it doesn't matter the truth of the perception. A person's perception is reality. What is your name, sir? Pardon? Dedian? Daniel. Okay. Daniel, say, "I fly jet planes." Just say, "I fly jets.
I fly jets.
And I run marathons."
And I run marathons.
Okay. So now, if Daniel said to me, "I fly jets and I run marathons," I'd say, okay. I'm not going to argue with him. I mean, he seems like an honest person. If he says it, then I believe it. Okay? So I accept what he says as the truth. So when you meet customers for the first time, what you say to your customer, they accept as the truth. If you say, "My name is Bryan Tracy, and I believe very much in the importance of good relationships with my customers. Our philosophy is to give superb customer service to our customers." People say, "Okay." You say it's true? No, I say it's true. And then we watch to make sure that what you say is consistent with what you said. So in interviewing tens of thousands of customers, we have asked them, how do you think and talk about the top salespeople? Now, we know who the top salespeople are when we ask them. And we know who the medium salespeople are, and so on. We find that salespeople have 3 positioning statements, or customers have 3 positioning statements about top salespeople. Number 1 is they see them as friends. They like them. They feel they're good people. They say, "This person cares about me more than they care about making a sale." Number 2, they say, "I view this person as a consultant more than as a salesperson. I see him or her more as an advisor, a counselor, a guide, and so on." And number 3, they see this person more as a teacher or a helper, a person who shows them how they can be better off. So your job is to create these 3 perceptions. The perception of being a high-quality relationship, an advisor and helper, a consultant, a problem solver, and a person who teaches rather than sells. If a customer sees you like that, they will buy from you. They will buy from you more readily. They will buy from you more regularly, and they will recommend you to their friends because they want their friends to buy from you as well. So your job is to influence this perception. And everything that you say counts. Here's the rule. Everything counts. Everything counts. Everything that you say counts. Everything that you do counts. Every interaction counts. We say that when you're talking to customers, you're talking about their money. And money is a very emotional issue. So they are hypersensitive to everything you say or do. If you say you'll be there at 10 o'clock and you come at 10 minutes after 10, they remember that. Is not on time for appointments, therefore can't be trusted. Is not dependable, therefore product is no good, therefore company is no good. Therefore prices are too high, therefore too dangerous to buy from this person. You say, well, how are you just coming late? I mean, how? Because you said you'd be there at 10. And you didn't come at 10, so you didn't say do what you said you would do. And if a person has half a brain and they're nervous, then what they do is they say that you probably won't deliver the product on time, and you probably won't service it if you say you will, and nothing else you say is true either. People say, well, what does it matter? Customers, you were talking about money. Money is very emotional. As they say, money's not the most important thing in life, but it's way up there with oxygen. You know. So, everything counts, and everything that you do affects this positioning. You see, if you have a great positioning so that people think and talk about you in a positive way, then whenever you call them, say, oh, I'll take his call. Or her call, and I got something I want to talk to you about. Good, and they'll see you more readily. They'll buy from you. Here's a good example. Is there anybody here who has a customer that buys from you without asking the price? I mean, after they've bought from you, they buy again, and they don't ask the price. You have customers like that? They just say, yes, I need some more? Say yes. Yeah. Well, is it because they don't care about the price? Why is it that they would buy without asking the price a second time? It's because your position is such that the prices that you charge will be the right prices. They will be fair prices. They'll be reasonable prices. They will be honest prices. Isn't that true? So they don't need to ask the price. It's like if you go to a restaurant, you don't need to ask, well, how much is every single, bit of fried rice? How much do I get? So in other words, once they trust you, and this brings us to the relationship selling model, and we say that there's two models of selling. There's the old model of selling, which is how I was brought up, and then there's the new model of selling. Now the old model of selling had 4 parts. The 4 parts, the first part of the old model of selling was establishing rapport. We're talking about, but it was very quick. Hi, how are you? And immediately start talking about your product or service. There are still a lot of salespeople who sell like this. They don't take any time to get to know and understand the customer. The second 20% of the old model was qualifying. We'd find out if they had, how much money they had before we would spend any time with them. The third part of the old model, 30%, was presenting, and this is where you used every trick possible to talk them out of the money you determined that they had in stage number 2. And the last 40% of the old model of selling was closing, and all the emphasis was on closing the customer to get them to buy. In the 70s, the market began to shift. As people became smarter, better educated, as the market became more competitive, the market shifted and it went through a transition to the new model of selling. Now the new model of selling has 4 parts as well. The first 40% of the new model of selling is building trust. Now we call this the relationship selling model. And if you can build enough trust, everything else will take care of itself. If you can't, nothing else will work, not even low prices. You know and I know that building trust is the key to all relationships. The most important people in your life are the people you trust. The most important people in your work life, family life. The most important part of relationships is to be able to trust people. Absolutely. And so trust is what starts a relationship. So the way that you build trust in sales is you ask questions about people's needs. Now the interesting thing is, the more you ask questions about what the person really needs, what they are doing now, how it's working, and listen to the answers, the more they trust you. And the more they trust you, the more they give you information about what they need. And the more they give you information, and the more you listen, the more they trust you. And eventually the customer will reach a point where they feel so comfortable with you that they will tell you everything that you need to know to help them, or to tell them that this is not a good product for them. They know that you will never sell them something that they don't need. You're a professional. So When you ask questions about their needs, you position yourself as a consultant. When you listen closely to the answers, you tell them that you really care for them. So you simultaneously build the two parts of the golden triangle, relationship selling and consultative selling. The third part of the new model of selling, this is 30, identifying needs is 30%. The third part, 20%, is presenting. And presenting is where you show the prospect exactly how your product or service will satisfy the person's needs. You show them how, and what we have found by watching the thousands of videotapes is that top salespeople have the ability to match products and services much better than average salespeople. In other words, when they sell, they only talk about what the customer has said is important. They don't talk about everything. They don't talk about everything they like. They listen carefully to what the prospect has said, and then they say, well, based on what you've said, our product or service will do this. Have you ever had an experience where you've gone to a store and the person said, can I help you? And you said, yes, I'm looking for this. And they said, yes, okay, follow me. And they take you and they show you something that is not at all what you said. Have you had this experience? You want to whack them right in the back of the head. Because it means they don't care about me. They weren't listening. They're wasting my time. But then you've had the other experience. The other experience is where you go to the store and you tell the person what you're looking for, and they say, did you want this or this? Well, this. I think we've got something. Come with me. And they take you, and there it is, and it's exactly what you described. The sale has been made, hasn't it? I mean, you've literally decided to buy because they've matched so closely what you said. So here's a rule in psychology. It is that people don't argue with their own information. They will argue with your information, but they won't argue with their own information. So therefore, if you show them that this is what they said and your product or service is exactly what they said, the sale has almost been made. Because people have, it has been identified in psychology as what is called consistency. Human beings have an intense inner desire to remain consistent with what they said. Have you ever had your kids say, Daddy, you said? But you just said, remember you said? Have you ever heard this? You don't remember saying it, but you feel compelled to do whatever it was because they told you that you said it. When a person says, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is our problems, and you say, well, our product will do this and it will do that and we'll solve that problem, people try to remain consistent with what they said. They don't argue with their own information. So therefore, really good salespeople make sure that their presentation fits like a hand in a glove into what the customer says they want. Oh, damn, this is good. All right. The last part, the last 10%, is confirming. Does this make sense to you? Do you like this? Is this what you're looking for? Until the customer says, yes, that makes sense, and then you can go on to close the sale. Now, let me give you the simplest of all closing techniques. It's called the invitational close, is where you simply say, well, if you like it, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you take it? Why don't you buy it? Or if you're selling services, say, well, if this makes sense to you, why don't you give us a try? The invitational close, why don't you give it a try, is a simple, powerful closing technique, one of the most powerful ever developed for a customer who's reached the end of the sales presentation. Do you like this so far? Yes, well, why don't you take it? I was speaking to a salesman in New York last week. He said, you know, that doubled my income. He said, it's my favorite closing technique. And he's a very successful guy. And double his income is a lot of money. He said, I'll double it again next year. He said, every single time I talk to a prospect, I present it, I ask any questions, I say, you have any questions? The person says, no. He says, why don't you take it? He said, it's amazing. They say, okay. So always, at the end of a sales conversation, invite the person to buy. Even if they say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure, let me think it over. You say, look, why don't you just take it? Okay. It's the most amazing darn thing. Look, you need it. You're going to get it sooner or later. This is a good price. We stand behind it. Why don't you just take it? Okay. It solves a problem. Remember, a product or service that a person needs solves the problem if you can sell it to them. Why don't you give it a try? Even if they're taking you by the neck and throwing you out into the street, say, why don't you take it? And often they say, oh, bring them back. We'll take it. You know. So So always, never leave a sales conversation. I used to come to the end of a sales talk, and I would be very enthusiastic, and I've got the appointment, I've made the presentation, everything else, and then I say, well, what do you think? You ever done that? Well, what do you think? The person says, well, I think I'd like to think it over. Which means goodbye forever. We'll never meet again. Okay, so this is the new model, and the new model is the relationship selling model, and here's the rule. Listening builds trust. Listening builds trust. And trust is the key to sales success in the 21st century. Your job is to build one trust relationship after another. Because even if they don't buy from you today, if the trust relationship has been established and you keep in touch with them, remember, salespeople, top salespeople are optimists. They make more calls, they call back more often. It may be the person can't buy today, but they will buy next week, next month. Trust is the critical factor. I got a ride to the airport by this salesman in Atlanta, Georgia, and brand new Mercedes. And he was taking me to the airport, and he said, how do you like my car? I said, it's beautiful. And he said, you want to know how I got it? I said, sure. He said, well, I listened to your material year after year, especially that part about persistence, and continuing to call back. I called on this major Fortune 500 company, and we sell telecommunications services, wireless, telephone, fiber optics, satellite communications, and this is a major company. This company is spending $3 million a year on our services with our competitor. So I called on him and I made a presentation. And he said, we really liked it, looks good. He said, but you know, we've been with this other company for many years and we're quite happy with this other company. We really don't need your services. I mean, I really enjoy looking at this. I like to keep informed about what's going on in the industry, but we're going to stay with our existing supplier. He said, well, that's fine. He said, but I'd like to keep in touch with you and keep you informed on what's going on in this industry because there's so many changes taking place that you should know what's going on. He said, well, that's fine. I like to keep informed. He said, if you want to keep in touch with me, that's fine. He said, but we're not changing. We're happy with our existing supplier. So he, once a month, would call back on this major decision maker. And he would bring in new information. And they would have a cup of coffee, spend 15, 20 minutes. And he says, is there anything I can do to help you? He said, no, we're fine. Everything's going fine. About 6 months after this started, going every month, he said, Bill, he said, you know, I really appreciate you dropping in each month and keeping me informed and everything else. He said, but, you know, we're really happy with the people we're dealing with. How long are you going to continue calling back on me? He said, until one of us dies. He said, you're really serious, aren't you? He said, yes, I am. He said, because this industry is changing so rapidly that there will come a time where we will have something that nobody else will have. We will be able to service you better than your existing supplier. He said, well, you know, if you're willing to spend the time, you go ahead. He called on him every month for a whole year. At the end of the year, their existing supplier put in a rate increase and didn't tell anybody. And in the United States, if you put in a rate increase, all you have to do is publish it somewhere in some newspaper. Nobody has to see it. But then you can say, you see, you published it, it was public. And the next year, it was a 22% rate increase. He saw it on the bill. The first time he saw it, it came up on the bill. It made him so mad, he called him in. He said, come in, we're going to give you the whole account. He said his commission for the first sale, the first year, was $186,000. US. And he said he bought a brand new Mercedes with it. So, until one of us dies. All right, listening builds trust. But the key is, once you've built the trust, keep the plate spinning. Just keep the relationship going. Remember, things are changing. Sometimes the biggest sale you'll make will take a year or 2 years before it comes together, and it'll be so big. I had one gentleman make one sale as a result of using some of these principles. He said he made one sale that was 68% of his entire year's quota in one sale, because it was solely based on building trust and maintaining that trust. So here are the 4 keys to listening. Number 1, listen attentively. Listen closely. Listen without interrupting. This is what tells the person that you care about them. Listen attentively. Lean forward. Nod. Smile. Pay close attention. And don't interrupt. Just listening closely to people causes them to feel better about themselves and like you more, and they like themselves more. Number 2 is pause before replying. Just pause. Allow for silence. Don't feel that you have to jump in. Just say, nod, smile, That's an interesting point. And number 3 is question. We say question for clarification. And the very best question you'll ever learn in selling, and I've had many people say that this one question has been worth everything to them, is the question, how do you mean? How do you mean? We can't afford it. How do you mean? Business is bad. How do you mean? We're happy with our existing supplier. How do you mean? We're not in the market right now. How do you mean? I don't like you. I don't like your company. I don't like your industry. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in doing business with you. How do you mean exactly? Here's the point. How do you mean is a control question. But it's also an invisible control question. An invisible control question is one that you can ask over and over again, and the person will always answer it. And they will always expand on what they said. You say, we can't afford it. How do you mean? Well, our business has been a bit slow lately. Well, how do you mean exactly? Well, we're down from the third quarter sales. Well, how do you mean? Well, we expected our sales to be this in the third quarter. In other words, every time you say, how do you mean, it opens up. But it's invisible because the question is never heard, only the answer. And as they give you the answer, very often you can see an opportunity to make the sale. You can see an opportunity to answer the objection and make the sale. So keep asking, how do you mean? How do you mean? And here's the rule, is the person who asks questions has control. The person who asks questions has control. The person answering the questions is controlled by the questioner. If you're in a sales conversation and they ask you a question, you're in danger of having them take control. Because as soon as you start answering, they're becoming the marionette and you're the puppet. Okay? So when a person asks you a question, what do? You say, that's a good question. Let me ask you something. And you ask your own question and take control. That's a good question, but let me ask you something. How do you mean exactly? Or what are you doing in this area? Or how is that working for you? Or when would you be thinking of making a decision if you found exactly what you were looking for? It doesn't matter what your question is, take control. The person who asks questions has control. By the way, I'm speaking primarily to the men here because the women all know this. Women are brilliant at controlling conversations with questions. Oh, they're so dangerous. I have 2 daughters, 22 and 10, and there's a stage in a woman's life where they're taken away by other women to a cave in the mountain, and they're taught how to control men for the rest of their lives. And ever after, they can control you with words and questions. For instance, you ask them something, they say nothing. They know that if they answer, you've taken control, so they won't respond. It's very unnerving for men.